Rob Wallach is a good friend of mine that I've worked with for many years, and so excited to be here today. Happy November 2nd. Yes, and so as Lowell mentioned earlier, we're going to talk today a little bit about how organizations develop using the Tuckman model. So I am going to share, see if I can share my screen here. All right. So the Tuckman model has been around for a while, but just to get us started into this space, because this is kind of a different space we're not used to being in all of the time, I wanted to do an opening exercise. So I've got a quote for you to start off with. Only in growth, reform, and change, paradoxically enough, is true security to be found. So when you think about the business that you lead or support, what comes to mind if you would post your answers in chat? Only in growth, reform, and change, paradoxically enough, is true security to be found. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute to see what folks have put into the chat. Go ahead and post your answers in chat. What do you think about that quote? Does everyone have access to this chat? Oh yes, if we aren't growing, we are dying. That's true. You don't ever stay still, do you? Thank you, Karen. What other thoughts do you have about this? I'd like to hear from just a couple more folks. Thank you, Mark. Right. In order to survive, I must constantly adapt or to stay ahead of the market. Yeah. Got to kind of always be looking forward and be thinking about what's that next stage. Devin, I have to change to meet evolving landscapes. Yes. How is the world changing around me? What context am I in? How is that changing? Right, Michael, it's easier to manage change by creating it. Yes. Thank you all. Good. So on that note, I'll go ahead and share my screen again. And so I would like to introduce you to the Tuckman model. So Bruce Tuckman was a psychology professor at Ohio State University, and through his research noticed that there were 4 stages that all teams seemed to go through, no matter how big or small they were, no matter how well they thought they knew each other or not. And he came up with this model in the 60s, and it's so robust, it's still relevant today. And so the 4 stages we're going to take a look at are forming, storming, norming, and performing. Here's what the model looks like. If you think about a team or an organization's effectiveness over time and how they perform, there's this V dip that happens, right? We start by forming. How are we coming together? And then we go through this area that's called storming, and you can't not go through the storming phase of things. You have to figure things out until you become a cohesive team and start figuring out what are your norms. And then not all teams, but teams that are fortunate get to go to the performing stage, where that's a really high performing functioning team that just runs like a well-oiled machine. And you'll see that there's a blue arrow at the bottom about that has the word reforming. So anytime you have an organization or a team where you lose members or you add members, and especially when you add members, you will go through these 4 stages again to a certain degree. Here's an overview of the 4 stages in forming. It's like what it says, we're coming together. It's that initial stage. Okay, I'm starting a new venture. I'm starting a new company. What does this look like? right? It's putting that structure of the team together. So team members can feel both excited and anxious here. We're kind of complex, messy people, right? We can have a lot going on at once. Conflict is avoided here. I want to just kind of get along because I'm new. People check each other out here. And this is a time for you as a leader to really provide direction and guidance. And then we get into storming. So this stage begins to occur as the process of organizing tasks and processes surfaces interpersonal conflicts. We have a lot of assumptions as adults, right? We're making judgments, and our unconscious brain is putting a lot of stuff together to make sense of our world. And so I might assume that we're going to be structured one way, and you might assume we're doing things a different way. This is that period where those things start to bubble up, and then we need to start managing to those, right? Structural issues dominate this stage. In norming, teams are creating a way of doing and being together. We're starting to figure stuff out. We begin to resolve discrepancies between our individual expectations and moving from I to we, right? Constructive criticism starts to begin to happen here. And then in performing, members feel attached to the team as something then greater than the sum of its parts. This is my systems thinking showing up here, right? We notice that what I do and what you do, it's not just an individual perspective. It's that we are something larger than all of us doing our own thing, right? True interdependence is the norm here. We know each other well enough and trust each other well enough that we're just moving and rocking it. Okay, we're flexible and highly productive at this stage. Let's do a little deeper dive. So in each of the 4 stages, there are 4 different things that we can attend to. There's the observable behaviors that show up, typical feelings and thoughts that team members will have, team needs and tasks that are effective in that particular stage to move forward, and then leadership. What's required of leadership in each of the 4 stages? So in forming, some of the things that you might be able to notice, people are very polite, right? We're orienting with others personally. It's all about me at this stage. How am I being accepted? What am I noticing? Again, we're avoiding controversy. Cliques might form here. So this is a stage where it's like, I might find 1 or 2 other people that are sort of like-minded. So let's us band together, right? There's a high need for safety and approval. We haven't figured things out here yet, right? We're starting to attempt to define tasks and processes. So what's happening internally for folks here, right? Team members might feel excited and optimistic, but they might also feel anxious and have some anticipation, fearful. What's expected of me? Why am I here? What's my role? I'm not quite sure yet. What are we doing? Right? There's some uncertainty and apprehension that can happen here. So what are some of the needs and tasks, right? It's really important for you as a leader to make sure that you've got some foundational pieces that you're putting into place. What's our team mission and vision? What is our reason for being, right? What's that North Star that we're aspiring to be, so that people understand that and can start moving in that direction? Establishing specific objectives and tasks that are in support of that mission and vision. Right? What am I supposed to be doing? Who's working with me? What's my role? What's my responsibility? Establishing team ground rules. How are we going to work with each other? How are we going to, what are we going to do when we meet? Who gets to run the meetings? How are we going to make decisions? Right? And this is a really important time for leaders to manage team member expectations, because as I said a little earlier, when people come into an organization, especially when you're forming a new organization, right, they might have their own assumptions and ideas about what it is, what it's going to be, what their role is. And if that's different than what your vision is, this is the time when we need to start course correcting that. And as a leader, what's required, right? Providing that structure and task direction, allowing for get acquainted time. So this is a time to kind of slow down a little bit and allow people to get to know each other. One of the things I help organizations with here is to do some personal histories exercise. The more that we know about each other, and there have been a lot of studies done around this, the more we know each other on a personal level and not just for the role that we play, the more we're more willing to grant trust and help the other person out when stuff hits the fan, or band together more as a team instead of just like doing my own thing. right? So really being actively involved in a leader. And this is a phase where directive involvement is more important. Yes, it's important to be collaborative and so forth, but when you're first forming, people really need to know that you've got a strong vision for where you want to go and what their role is in for it. So of all of the stages, this is the one where being more directive. Sue, I need you to go do X. Bob, I know that you'd like to get into this area, but right now I need you to focus on Y. So that is the forming stage. Then we get into the storming phase. So what might you be observing in this stage? Arguments start to happen. All of a sudden, the gloves are off a little bit, right? People are vying for position and power. Hey, if things haven't been formed yet, maybe I get to be this person that gets to do this thing, right? Differences in points of view and personal style become pretty evident here. There's still maybe a little bit lack of role clarity. Teams are attempting to organize themselves, but maybe not doing a really great job of it. They still need your involvement. Power struggles, clashes can happen here, especially if you've got cliques that have formed. And I will say the clique formation thing tends to happen when you have more than 6 people on the team. Lack of consensus seeking behavior shows up. It's more about me and my way still at this point in time, right? We can feel a lack of progress. This is that point in the evolution where you might feel stuck, right? And also we might establish unrealistic goals. You have these pie in the sky ideas like, oh, hey, we could do this. Wouldn't that be cool if with this organization, we could just do this cool thing out here? But we're not really thinking about realistically how we might get there. Feelings and thoughts that typically show up here: defensiveness, confusion, loss of interest. It's like, oh, you guys go off and do that thing. That's not how I would do it, right? Resistance to tasks, a fluctuation in attitude about the thing. So it might be like one day somebody's really interested and excited, like, hey, this is great. And then the next day it's like, oh, I can't be bothered. Unsure if I agree with the mission and purpose. So people will start questioning you, your leadership, and where you want to go. They're going to be pushing the boundaries here. Is this really where you're going? I'm not sure about this. I think we should be doing X instead. And that's just a natural part of the evolution. So just be prepared for that. Questioning the wisdom of the team members too can show up here, especially if people are vying for position. Well, I know you wanted Sue to do this thing, but you know what, really, I'm the better person for this. I'm not sure she's really qualified, right? There's an increase in tension. Jealousy might show up here. Unsure about personal influence and freedom within the team. And again, that stuckness, we're not getting anywhere. So what are the tasks and leadership requirements in this stage, right? Opportunities to develop those interpersonal relationships. This is the time when you really want to do some good team building exercises, get people out of their comfort zone and get them to know each other better. Get them to have shared experience. That's one of the biggest things you can do in the storming phase, is to get your folks to have shared common experiences that they can then have as a foundation for working together, right? Identifying stylistic and personal differences is really important here. We are wired differently. We forget about that. Lowell mentioned that I'm a senior consultant with the Birkman Method. If you're not familiar with Birkman, it's like Myers-Briggs on steroids. It's pretty in-depth information. So I do a lot of work with folks around this too, around how our styles are different. I'll give you an example. Before we start on a project, important to understand how much people like to plan out in detail their work or not. Some people are wired to want to put every single detail in place before they hit the go button on the project. Other people like to do what I call emergent design, or they're more action oriented. Let's figure it out as we go. I don't need a stinking plan. Let's just get in there and do things. Well, if you don't know the style differences there between those two people, you're going to get butts heading and finger pointing, and you're not going to get very far there. And it will become personal attacks tend to happen there. That's just one example. We need to be able to learn how to actively listen to each other and give and receive constructive feedback. Clarifying and understanding the team's purpose again, and then reestablishing roles, responsibilities, ground rules. It might be continuing to reiterate what you came up with originally, or you may have found that you want to make some adjustments in roles and responsibilities. So this is a time to really kind of solidify those things, those structures. And also how to deal with team members violating codes of conduct. Hey, if we put these ground rules in place or ways of being in place, and Some people are continuing to violate those. How are we going to manage that? How are we going to start holding people and each other accountable in an appropriate way, right? Leadership requirements, right? Again, reiterating that mission and purpose, getting members to assume more task responsibility. So this is a time for you as a leader to start looking at what pieces of your operation can you start giving away, which can be a little bit difficult to do if it's your baby, right? But as you grow, you know that how important that is to start allowing some people, and delegating comes in here. And it's interesting, we can have a whole nother conversation about this. There are 6 degrees of delegation. Delegation isn't an all or nothing thing. It could be, I'm going to ask you to do this thing, and I'm going to have quite a bit of oversight with it, to I want this end state and you go do, and there's a whole bunch of other ways to delegate in between. And so being really thoughtful and slowing down enough to say, as we're forming and storming here and starting to get into solidifying how we go about our business, what things can I then give to other folks, right? The concept of shared leadership here then emerges as well. Am I starting to develop departments? Who do I want to have leading those? Teaching active listening, how to give and receive that feedback shows up here too. So allowing for that development development piece here is really important too. How can we learn together so that we can move out of this phase? Offering support and praise. And little wins here are really important. Being able to praise folks in the team when you have small wins. Because this, you all know it takes a lot of energy and effort to start a new organization. And so also you being there to be supportive, even if you think, oh, the team knows they're doing a good job. It's really important, especially, and this can be a really stressful time. And when we're stressed, our brain has a lot of our blood in our system, and our brains, the blood can go to our limbs to either fight or flee. And so during times of stress, knowing that you have to really over communicate with your team, because it'll bounce off of them because of what's happening with them internally. So making sure that you're over communicating at this stage is really important. Actively involving team members and consulting one another, sharing that shared leadership emerges here. So how can you start connecting more of your team to each other? And then you kind of starting to step out of the way a little bit. Norming. Okay, now we're starting to get through some of that stuff that's not so fun to deal with, right? Processes and procedures are agreed upon. Okay, this is how we're going to do this. This is how many times a week we're going to meet. This is how we're making decisions. This is how we can engage with each other in a structured, meaningful way, right? We become more comfortable with our relationships. Our focus and energy becomes more about on the task and the business at hand than how we're going to work together and what's my place in it. So this energy gets freed up. Effective conflict resolution skills come into effect here, right? Sincere attempts to make consensual decisions shows up here too. Hey, you know what? I've got an idea, but I really want to hear from you too. Or you know what? I want to hear from everybody around the table. So I want everyone to take just a minute, write down some ideas, and then we're going to talk about all of our ideas. Since balance, influence, shared problem solving shows up here, right? Routine starts to come into play here. We set and achieve task milestones, right? So again, it's becoming more task oriented. Trust is established, and that's foundational for any team. Do I have a sense of psychological safety with this? I know I'm not going to get called out if I put a wild idea out there. Sense of belonging to a team. It's not just about me. Confidence in myself and the team and my members. I'm getting to know them well enough that I have confidence in them. And so how can you as a leader help with that and help reinforce that, right? Team members feel a new ability to express criticism constructively. Conflict isn't seen as a negative here. It's just energy to be used. Acceptance of all members, assured that everything is going to work out okay, right? Freedom to express and contribute shows up here. I feel like it's okay for me to contribute. I don't have to just kind of say what I think people want to hear. So the tasks and leadership required here, right? Developing those decision-making processes. There are lots of ways to make decisions. It doesn't always have to be by consensus, nor should it. There are certain times when that's okay. And I found that People don't mind if you use a different style of decision making, as long as you let them know what it is. So as a leader, are you just going to ask for everyone's opinion, like consult with them? And say, at the end of the day, folks, you know what? I'm the one who has to make this decision. I'm going to get all of your input. I may or may not go the way that you're asking me to. And because in the end, this is really something that I'm going to be held accountable for. And so there are lots of different ways that we can make decisions. Being prepared to offer ideas and suggestions, right? And actively asking for that here. Because people in the storming phase may not have felt comfortable, or they might have gotten shot down for sharing an idea or an opinion. And so you've got to really reinforce positively that this is okay. And so really praising people, like in a meeting situation, if a brave soul speaks up and says, you know what, I'll put my idea out there, make sure you're reinforcing that and saying, hey, Bruce, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the courage to share your idea there. What other ideas do you folks have around the table? Right, using all resources to support the team effort. We know each other well enough here that we can start relying on each other for the people's areas of expertise, what their strengths are. How do we start really playing to our strengths, right? Team members take responsibility in shared leadership skills. So maybe we have people that are starting to lead meetings or lead projects or lead things within the organization. Shared elevated goals are really reinforced here. So it's not just about my goal, but what as a department or a company are we trying to achieve? And I feel like I'm part of something larger than myself, right? And again, collaboration becomes clearer here. As a leader, shared leadership, how can you start stepping back a little bit and letting people run more of the day-to-day, so you can be out there getting the business or being strategic or doing whatever it is that you need to do, right? Giving feedback and support, allowing for a little bit less structure. I call this a freedom within a frame. Now that we've got a framework put in place, we've got some structures, policies, procedures, ways of working together, right? Then how can I allow my people then to go do what they do in the way that they want to, which may be a different style than what I have, right? Promoting team interaction. Hey, I really want you folks, people to work together on this project. Here's how here's my expectation. Please go do, right? As I said earlier, asking for contributions from all team members, making sure you're being really thoughtful about that and proactive, encouraging others in making decisions. Hey, you know what, you're coming to me. I know you've been coming to me, but I really think you're ready now to go make this decision. And what we can talk about how it goes afterwards, right? Continuing to build those strong relationships and celebrating wins. Quite often we get so caught up in like that hamster wheel of go, 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 especially when we're just forming a new organization. We don't stop to celebrate those wins, especially in Western society. So it's so important just to take a few minutes, and it doesn't always have to be a great big thing. It could be just a thank you to everyone. Hey, I recognize you guys did a really good job. Everybody pulled together, and look what we were able to accomplish. Most people don't leave organizations. They leave managers, or they leave because they feel like they're not appreciated. That's probably one of the number one things. And it doesn't cost anything but a little bit of your thought and time to appreciate your folks. So performing, and again, not everyone gets here. These are high-performing organizations. And if you want to learn more about high-performing organizations, Google did a study a few years ago. It's called the Aristotle Project, that talks a lot more about this and what that looks like. So I encourage you to do some research on your own around that. Right. At this stage, we're a fully functioning team. Roles are really clear. Everybody knows how they fit within the organization, what they bring to the table. Right. We develop independence. We're not always reliant on the leader to pave the way and say, here's where we're going and here's the decision I'm making and so forth. Decision making starts happening down deeper into the organization, right? We're able to organize ourselves. There's a flexibility, right? So we function well both individually and in groups and as a team, as an organization. And so if there's a part of the organization that's really struggling with something and has a deadline, when you're in a performing team like this, other people are like, hey, let me roll up my sleeves and help you out. There isn't this attitude of, well, that's not my job or that's their problem. It's like, we're all in this together, so let's make this work, right? better understanding of each other's strengths and weaknesses, insights into group processes. So we're really, again, that well-oiled machine. And how do people feel and think when they're in this phase? We have empathy for one another. Again, instead of saying, oh, it's Joe's problem over there, it's like, oh my gosh, that's terrible that that thing's happening to you. How can I help? High commitment to the team, collaborative work ethic, tight bonds emerge. Fun and excitement shows up here too, because we're not worried about you get this and I get that and all of this unknown. It's like we have enough energy freed up because we're not having to deal with all of that storming stuff, that we can actually have, it's fun to come to work. It's like, hey, I get to do this and they're paying me for it, right? Lots of personal development and creativity shows up here. This is, again, where creativity, innovation shows up. Sense of satisfaction and that continual discovery of how to sustain feelings of momentum and enthusiasm. So what are some of the tasks that happen here? Opportunities to share leadership, input into new team members. So if our team is going to be added to or changed, allowing the whole entire team as much as possible to have some say in it, because as I said at the beginning, there's that reforming phase that we go through. And so being really mindful that how do we think this person coming in might change or shift the team? And is that something that we see as a positive, right? The team is moving in a collaborative direction. Again, we're all rowing the same way. Flexibility and autonomy, providing real-time information. So as you as the leader are paving the way and working your strategy and getting out there, how are you sharing back in a timely manner so people, the folks that are working for you, can get in there and do the day-to-day work? Opportunities to celebrate wins, and then again, building on those best practices. And your job is to uphold the vision, right? Maintain team flexibility, a little bit more letting go, perhaps, that freedom within a frame, more hands-off, and continual positive feedback and dialogue, staying in contact. So those are the 4 phases. And a little quote for you. I love this idea that awareness gives us choice. So once you're aware of this model and that this is a natural progression that any team or organization goes through, it gives us choice and that opportunity to engage appropriately based on where you're at. So when we know about the stages, we can effectively manage to and through them. Here are some ways to use the Tuckman model. Assessing. You can assess your current reality. I'm amazed sometimes at how many organizations you're running so hard and fast that you don't really step back to really understand where are we really? And so that's a lot of the work I do is like, well, let's do an assessment, right? You can do this in a couple of ways. You can do this as a leader on your own. Where do I think we're at? And a lot of the work I do is with the team. So I've got a process that I use with teams to figure out where do we really think we are in terms of the Tuckman model in our development stages. And then you can use it for adjusting, right? You can adjust your leadership style to meet team member needs. So you'll have opportunity to have access to this deck afterwards. So you can look through some of those leadership pieces of, okay, if I'm at forming, I know I need to be more directive. When we're norming, I probably need to pull back a little bit and maybe invite people in a little bit more. So you as a leader or as somebody as an angel investor supporting and guiding, right? How do you need to adjust depending on where you're at, right? Identifying your preferred future. So as much as we can say, okay, well, here's where we're at, where do we want to be? What would be the natural next steps for us in our evolution as a team using the Tuckman model? There's this idea called structural tension, and Robert Fritz has done a lot of work around this. That says the clearer we are as an organization of where we are currently and where we want to go, creates a natural energy for us to move in that direction. And then after we identify our preferred future, creating goals. And so this is what I call the so what of this. So it's a great model, but what do you do with it? So if we know where our current reality is and where our preferred future is, we can come up with some goals based on that for both the leader and the team that you can put into, if you've got annual reviews or annual goals that you put together for people, making this real, right? Put some SMART goals together to work towards our preferred future. So let's take a look at an example. So this is a team I worked with a few years ago. Let me get rid of that ribbon so you can. There we go. And so here's a chart that I like to use with teams. So I put a big chart up on the wall, and so let's say we had a team of 12 people. I might put them in groups of 4, and I'm going to give them make them do forced ranking. So I might give them 5 red dots, sticky dots, and say, okay, I'd like you to have a conversation over the next 10 minutes and talk through where you think this team is, where's current reality for you, and be prepared to explain to the rest of the folks why you chose those 5 things. And then I invite the team to come up and share and put their red sticky dots on the chart and talk to the rest of the group about why they chose where they put their dots. And this is really where the gold is, right? Is having this conversation. So all 3 teams of 4 people would get a chance to come up, put their sticky dots there, and then we have a conversation about it. Then I give them 5 green dots. What's your preferred future? What would be those next places in the stages that you think you would like to get to? That would make the most sense for this team. And again, have them have a small group conversation, come together, put their dots up on the chart, and let's have a conversation about it. So you can see with this group, this was an HR team that had a fairly new leader, only had been around less than 6 months, and quite a few new team members. So you can see they were pretty clear that they were pretty much in the forming stage. You'll notice that not all the dots are in the same stage either. So this is not a completely linear thing where you go completely from forming to storming. It's not unusual for teams to feel like they might have a little bit of a foot in both camps of a stage stages that are next to each other. And so you can see here that they picked almost everything in the forming stage of where they were at, but also they felt like they had some small successes and that the team is creative, right? And people were pushing for position and power. And so then where did they want to get to, right? Articulating roles and responsibilities, right? Agendas go from being private to being, we want to kind of really know what's going on for people, right? Appreciation and trust, right? They wanted their purpose to be well defined, right? That they felt wanted to establish a way for them to have feedback and for the leader to reinforce their behaviors, right? And gaining commitment from the team that they wanted to be a real team. And so then, oops. So here is the second chart. So some action steps. So there are some typical action steps you can take to move from storming to forming to storming, storming to norming, and then norming to performing. And again, I asked each group to talk about what tasks they think would be most helpful, and come together as a group and share, and then come to consensus on what they would like to work on. So establishing roles. So that was really a leader goal, right? Okay, leader, we really need you now that we've got some new positions on the team. We need a sense as a team of knowing who really specifically who's doing what, because some of us are feeling like we should, there's more than one person that thinks that that's their role, right? How do we build trust? Deciding once and for all to be a team, right? Agreeing on individuals' roles and responsibilities, listening to one another. Everyone works actively to set a supportive environment, right? And maintaining traditions was important. And so these are sort of broad, so you can take each one of these and then come up with a specific goal. Okay, when we listening to one another, what does that look like as a specific SMART goal that everybody could work on? Okay, when I'm talking to a team member, it means I need to be able to just focus and put everything and actively listen and give them my full attention. That's an observable behavior that you could measure, right? So that's a bit about the charts and the process. And then with using that process, then I might also be coaching the leader along the way to say, hey, how are you doing? And let's do some check-ins and what's working well, what's getting in the way. And so I'll go back to my other. So again, now that you've been introduced to the Tuckman model, I would love to have you put into chat your answer to this question. Based on what you've learned today, in what ways could the Tuckman team development model be helpful to you and your organization? If you would, post your answers in chat. Again, based on what you've learned today, in what ways could the Tuckman team development model be helpful to you and your organization? I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and just see what people have come up, what you've come up with. Great structure. Yeah, so having that structure is so important, isn't it, Michael and Mark? Providing a way to organize and structure needs of a team to enable them to be successful in their mission. Yes, it does. Enabling everyone to feel better about the lack of operational infrastructure. Yes, especially when you're first starting, that's so natural, right? Hey, we're just in this space and we won't live here forever, right? Being more aware of the storming phase. Yeah, and providing the appropriate leadership there. Thank you. Good. All right, I would like to hear from you. What questions do you have about the Tuckman model, about the phases, about leading through those 4 different phases? Yes, thank you, Isaac. Can't tell you the number of teams, organizations I've been in where members come from different corporate cultures, yes, and environments. And so we've got all of these different ways of being that then it's like, well, this model could really help to say, okay, based on that, because we're all coming from these different perspectives and expectations, right? To get everybody on the same page. Okay, how to best sell the need for it within an organization. I think I would start by maybe asking the leaders some questions. You know, how are you doing? How is the momentum within the organization? How are people getting along? Where are you spending energy where you're feeling like it's not productive? And then this model can help, right? Are you feeling stuck? Are you feeling like, geez, I feel like I'm always making the decisions and people are coming to me. I wish I could move beyond that. Yeah, would you say the performing phase isn't ideal? It is. It doesn't happen that often. Yeah. Yeah, teams are in constant flux, so getting to an optimized state it is rare. I've had it twice in my career, and it's pretty magical when it happens because you're just kind of in this state of flow where you're not worried about anybody else or if you're going to fit in, or we just come together and we can be together. And it's a very rare thing. It's pretty cool when it happens because you got so much energy to do other cool stuff, right? And you're right. Yeah, we are kind of always in a state of constant flux. And I think that's another reason why this model is helpful, because it helps to just put some structure around that. You know, are we kind of seesawing back and forth? And typically when, you know, we're in flux is that we're not really in that normative stage, or we've got norms and then all of a sudden we've got a new member. And what does that mean? And this gives you a way to identify, okay, where are we going back to? How are we reforming? What do we need to do in order to move through and get back to this normative stage where we are? Yeah. Other questions? And feel free to unmute if you can. I'm not sure if we've allowed that. And just answer your question or raise your hand. Yes, I think that's true, Mark. So he says, I've seen this idea work well in small teams, but it seems the challenge increases as team size grows. It can be, and so that's why I like to do small groups with it, because I've done teams of upwards of 50 people with this. And so having small groups, and this is a good adult learning practice, we learn from each other. Having small groups of 4 or 5 or 6 people have that discussion first and then come up and share, and having that, and you can also then break it out too. So if you've got a really large organization, I would start maybe at a division level or a department level and pull those folks together. And then you could have your leadership take a look at what are the patterns that you see across the organization when you look at those dots, or where people identify where they're at, and then and roll it up from there. So there are ways of getting at it with a larger organization. That's a good question. Other questions or curiosities about this? Anyone? Oh, that's a good question. How do you measure its success? Yeah. Some of the ways you can measure the success of this is how, if you think about like from a decision-making standpoint, how deep in the organization are we able to allow some agency for decision-making? Because decision-making should be getting down into the organization the further you move along the stages. Right at the beginning, it's going to be you as the leader, and maybe you and 1 or 2 other people, right? How well are people getting along? How much time are you as a leader or the managers in your organization having to spend on interpersonal stuff versus being creative? You can't be creative and innovative until you're in that norming stage. So what's our level of creativity here? What is your turnover? If people are feeling good about being on the team, they're going to stick around longer. So that those are just a few ways that you can measure it. You can also ask people. Another way to measure it might be kind of cool is to get that chart out again and say, hey, a year later, and I've done this with quite a few teams, where are we at today? Where are your red dots? Where are your green dots? And then put up the chart from last year and the chart from this year and say, look at the movement that we've made. So that's another way is to get that kind of feedback from the team itself. Thank you, Lolita. Thanks for joining us. Good. Other questions or ideas or concerns about using the model or how it might be helpful? I will say out loud too that as a leader, this is a really wonderful launching pad to start gaining an understanding of where your team is at and how you're engaging. And so quite often I will use this as a first half of a day event, and then we'll do a team Birkman event to talk about then what do we do with this and how are we working together and what do you need from me as a leader? So it's a wonderful introductory piece to do, to then for you to say, okay, here's what I'm hearing from my team. If they feel like roles and responsibilities aren't clearly defined or we don't have a mission yet, that's on me as a leader. So what am I going to do about that? So then you might ask some further questions and dig about, okay, what is it that the team's looking for that maybe I'm not providing that would be helpful right now in this stage, right? Yeah, Mark, do you have specific publications, books to assist a leader using this technique? Yeah, some may be more comfortable with more material to support their efforts. Yes, there are, so you can go online and look up the Tuckman model a little bit more. There's quite a bit of information out there to support it. But then again, you might want to look up Robert Fritz's information on the path of least resistance and that idea of structural tension. I'm just trying to think of what other publications would be helpful for this specific thing. Oh, another one, just from a leadership standpoint, would be Leadership on the Line by Heifetz. He is out of the Sloan School of Management from MIT, and talks through about some of the concepts that would be helpful from a leadership standpoint of what's required as you're forming. Edgar Schein has some good information about the concept of unfreezing, reforming, and refreezing as an organization. So anything by Edgar Schein I would recommend as well as something that would be good to look into. Good. Other ideas or questions that you have? Oh, I just got a message that Lowell lost power, so I will be wrapping this up for you today. All right, so if there aren't any other questions, I really appreciate your time and attention. I hope that you find this helpful, useful in whatever way works for you. And I'll just screen share just one more time. Oh, I'm good. This has been helpful. Yes, any feedback from you, please put in the chat. I'm also very open to feedback. If there's something that worked well, great. If there's something you would have appreciated differently, I'm also very open to that. And oh, good. People found it interesting. Then this deck is available and it has all of my information. So if you want to have a further chat about this or anything else that you think I might be able to be of help with, all my information is on here. So do let me know. And I appreciate all of you and all of the good work that you're doing in creating new opportunities with new organizations, and the best of luck to all of you. So thank you and have a good rest of your day. So we'll say goodbye.